Now, with the lockdown of 2 states in Nigeria and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, well into a third day, it is conceivable that a number of security challenges would be recorded.
Very well said. To some Nigerians, security measures deployed to ensure that lockdown is achieved very porous, especially in Lagos, where some citizens continue to hang on around streets. To some others, security of lives and properties are a responsibility of every Nigerian, who must ensure that the purpose of the lockdown is achieved as a collective effort.
Well, joining us now is Davidson Isibor Akhimien, an ex-military intelligence officer and director of security services, Babcock University, Ileshan, Remo, Ogun State. Welcome to the morning show. Thank you for joining us, sir. Now, as an ex-military intelligence officer, I want you to react to this. The defense headquarters have come out to say that there will be no need for military to enforce the lockdown declared by President Muhammadu Buhari. He actually even said, and I quote, that it would only help when the first line of enforcement agencies are having difficulties. Now, around Lagos, we're beginning to see people clamor for lights, for food, and saying that they won't stay home if these things are not met. What is your reaction to this? How should the enforcement agencies react to this kind of thing?
Well, thank you for having me on the program this morning. I think I want to align properly with the Ministry of Defense with regards to its pronouncements on the lockdown. Well, too often, the Nigerian government has deployed the military for things that the military ordinarily should not be involved in at preliminary stages. For example, talking about internal security problems. The military is supposed to be called in when all has failed and all security agencies other than the armed forces have failed in dealing with internal security issues. So today you find military men at roadblocks, military men doing a clearing of roads, military men doing all that. We have undermined the functions of the military officers of our country. So I think I very much align with them in that regard. Let the appropriate security agencies of the police, the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, and we have a host of them, FEMA, road safety, let them do their job and see how they can ensure that they enforce the clampdown or the lockdown on Nigerians during this period. And when it goes awry, then the military can come in. So talking about response rates, honestly, much as there's been this hue and cry about Nigerians not wanting to remain at home, well, I can say from my personal observation that there has been a very great compliance rate, a very high degree of compliance on the part of Nigerians, especially knowing that most of the Nigerians that we find today are in the informal sector, where they live on their daily earnings from their daily trade. But with what I can see, there's been a very great compliance rate.
So I'd like to respectfully disagree with you about, the role of the military. When you check other nations of the world, when you check America, for instance, in terms of national emergency, they bring in what they call the National Guard, which is the military. America has a lot of police officers, well-grounded police officers, FBI team and the likes that they can bring into, but they bring in the military. And when you check other parts of the world, the military does this work. I want to talk about the discretion of the military officers deployed thus far. We have seen videos here and there. I mean, suffice to say, if our producer can get the video in, we'll have just shown one of those, scenes where it was alleged that the military, and I use the word alleged, that the military acted in indiscretion, hurting the people they're just supposed to send back to their homes in times like this. What would you say about that? And how can the military work in tandem with the people here? Because we are not in a state of war. We are just fighting a disease that we do not know, that is a common enemy.
My brother, the fact that something is done in America does not mean that it's right. We have a constitution that guides us. And by our constitution, the military is only brought in to support the government where all efforts by other security agencies have failed. You don't use the military anyhow. The security agencies have not been overwhelmed as it is now. So we are saying when the first line of defense is broken, then we can deploy the military. Let's go by our constitution. We don't have to look at other countries of the world because they are doing stuff and we should do stuff like that. No, we have a constitution that guides us, and I think we're not overwhelmed yet.
Okay, And at that point, when we become overwhelmed, because we are seeing defiance all over the country. In fact, a particular incident before the lockdown, and it's not even part of any of these 3 states, in Katsina to be precise, Kasuda local government area, a cleric was arrested, and the youth in the area went and burnt down the police station. Katsina is not even on a lockdown, and we see that reaction. So we are likely to see increased defiance as the lowest in the economic ladder continue to complain about living conditions. So should that front line break down, what role should the army play? In South Africa, the army is enforcing a lockdown. In Iran, it is decontaminating communities. In Italy, sadly, the military is one conveying the dead. What role would you like to see the military play should that front line eventually break down?
Okay, I think it's important we get something straight. This fight against this disease will take a multi-sectoral approach. And as it is now, I think that a heavy dose, very high dose of public enlightenment is required. Now we are still talking about the cities. When this thing gets to the grassroots, I mean, it will be a disaster. What level of public enlightenment is taking place now at the grassroots level? So let us see other agencies come to play. Let us see the National Orientation Agency. Let's see the different ministries of information at the federal and state level. Let us see local government authorities. Let us see traditional rulers. Let us see religious leaders carrying out this public enlightenment down to the grassroots. I think the deficiency here that we have is in the area of public enlightenment. Many people, even out there in our rural areas, still are not aware of the disease that is called COVID-19. Many people don't even believe it exists. So I think there needs to be a heavy dose of public enlightenment. When the people are properly enlightened, I am very sure the people on their own and by themselves will, take the necessary measures and comply with government regulations. But I don't think we should be militarizing our society.
Okay, on the flip side, let's talk about those who fear that there will be compromise on the part of the security agencies we have on ground already. Is that a legitimate fear? Do you share that sentiment that the police officers who are in charge of maintaining law and order at this time and are at the front lines of all of this would be compromised?
Well, by compromise, what do you mean? Are you talking about them being bribed to breach, for people to breach the lockdown order?
Exactly.
Well, let me tell you, see, as much as possible, we try to do the best. We try to put our best foot forward. Police officers in this country have been maligned in so many instances, but we just keep getting better. Now, there is no society in the world where you can totally overrule or outrule corruption on the part of law enforcement agencies. But the degree of the corruption is what we are talking about here. You cannot possibly compromise all police officers that are deployed to all stations to observe the lockdown in all states of the Federation. So where there are pockets of compromise here and there, I think we should look at the bigger picture and try to see how we can stem all of those small incidents of compromise. But you cannot totally, we are all human, and we see all of the frailties of humanity, and they also play out with our security agents out there. So what we try to do is to see how we can curb all of these issues of compromise, and then look at the bigger picture. And public enlightenment, like I said, not only enlightening the public, but also bringing to bear the need for the enforcement of these rules upon the security agents themselves, so that they will know the gravity of the situation that we have at hand.
You can say these pockets, in your words, not mine, you can say these pockets of, incidents here and there, but those pockets are very grave violation of human rights. And we have started to see them. And I did ask a very poignant question earlier on about how the military is being called to order as regards this. Because when amnesty starts to write, we shouldn't be able to have nobody wants a crime against humanity for COVID-19, but we're beginning to see pockets of those cases. Videos like that are beginning to suffice here and there. What's the military doing as regards this?
You're talking about pockets of
people that don't comply, beatings, telling people to roll on the floor, that they don't comply, that are found walking outside, beating, pouring all sorts of water on them. These videos don't look good.
That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. I mean, Nigeria signed into law the Anti-Terror, Anti-Torture Act in 2017. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, the government has been trying to see how we can abide by the provisions of this convention. However, it is an evolving thing. We will continue to see how we can educate our security agents to comply with the provisions of the Convention of Anti-Torture Law. Now, don't forget that our democracy is young, and we come from a history of military rule. So that culture, there needs to be what you call a deculturization, a deculturization of the people, shedding off the military toga, that toga of force. However, in other countries, you also see these videos of how military men and policemen use, torture to get the people to comply. But in Nigeria, relatively speaking, I think we have a better record. We have a better record in recent experience.
I agree with that, but I want to change gears for a bit. Now, a few days ago, the Minister of Interior, Mr. Aregbesola, came out to call for the immediate decongestion of all correctional centers in the country. Now, as a security expert, I would like to know what your take on this, because he has come out to say that, in not doing this, we stand a chance of an outbreak of COVID-19 amongst these inmates, amongst the correctional officers, and that could, in case, spread out to become a bigger outbreak. What is your reaction to this?
Yes, thank you. And that brings to the fore, the need for what you call the security sector reforms that we have been talking about in the past. Our prisons are over-congested. There's no doubt about that. If we had built newer and bigger prisons in the past, would have been able now to decongest the prisons in view of what is happening with the COVID-19. Be that as it may, I think a further step that the Minister of Interior can take in decongesting our prisons is to identify cases that are not as serious, especially persons that are awaiting trial, persons that have not been convicted in court. Let us examine some of these cases, and there are many for number, and then see how we can delineate, how we can separate these, and probably make releases. Then identify locations that can serve as prison grounds, so that we separate some of these hard prisoners and decongest the prisons in that way.
Okay, let's go on a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk some more. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. We're still talking about the likely security challenges we may experience during this lockdown. To help us dissect this is ex-military intelligence officer and director of security services at the Babcock University, Ogun State, Davidson Isibor Akhimien. Thank you so much for staying with us. Apart from the food security challenge that we may face at this time, there are reports of burglary into shops and businesses. There are also reports of street urchins taking advantage of these roadblocks we're seeing. Are these the trend we should be worried about, or there are more to come? What's your assessment of the likely security challenges we may face as this lockdown continues?
These threats are to be expected, and indeed, as the days go by, when we enter further and further into the hunger pang, we will be experiencing and recording more of these cases of burglary for reasons of lack of food in the home, We'll be experiencing cases of burglary. Like I said before, majority of Nigerians are in the informal sector, where they earn their daily bread from daily, deploying their handwork daily. So where this is absent and the economy is tied down, they will have no other option. Where there are no social palliative measures by government, there's no distribution of foodstuff, or if there is, it's not enough, it's inadequate. What you'll find that people will be breaking into homes, just to get food. People will be breaking into shops, just to get food, because money is not very important these days. When you have money, you can't have anything to buy with it. You can't buy anything with it. So the prime object now is food. Families are going for food. People are going for food. Talking about street urchins, the streets now are empty. They are not as policed as they used to be. So it's a free for all, and the street urchins have their day.
I've got a quick insight, and I want to talk about the soft power part of the military here. And correct me if I'm wrong, because you said earlier that it's not constitutional for the military to be able to do all those other things. But let's talk about the soft power. And in war-torn zones, you've seen the military build schools, take care of children, and the likes. Aren't we looking at that possibility in this time? Can't we see more military doctors? Can't we see, the military too in the front line in terms of, taking care of the citizenry? Is that not constitutional?
It's a constitutional. I mean, it behoves the government. When the government feels it is necessary to get the military to step in, the government will do just that. And talking about these areas of military doctors and pharmacies, helping the public health safety fight, I think it's a thing of course. It's a thing of normal course. I think the military authorities are also looking into that. What I'm talking about, you see, what I'm against is totally militarizing the society and bringing down the military to the level of the police, and the military usurping the responsibilities of the police and other security agencies. That's what I'm against.
Okay, I'd like to talk about the announcement that was made by the head of the national coordinator of the Presidential Task Force, Dr. Sanaliu, talking about selling goods and groceries that would start to happen every 48 hours. Now, looking at it, and the enforcement of the lockdown, having people coming out every 48 hours to buy food because of the panic that we already have in the nation, we might see a surge of people coming through to the markets, and social distancing might not be duly observed. Now, is there anything that the military can do to make sure that in the happenstance of these markets opening, people are continuing to observe social distancing and, as a result, curb the spread of the virus?
Yeah, I'm very surprised why your emphasis these days on the military. Have we exhausted the police forces? Have we exhausted the manpower that exists in the police forces, in Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps? Maybe you should use the term security agents rather than the military, because it's a bastardization of the military. When you talk, you want to use the military to do run-of-the-mill duties, duties that are supposed to be for the agents of government. So maybe you should use the term security agents, not the military. When the federal government believes that the military is needed to be called in, the military will be called in, but not at the behest of, anybody.
Okay, so I direct that same question to you. What can the security officials do to make sure that in observing social distancing during these markets that are open every 48 hours to ensure people getting food? And like you even said earlier, to stop the spread of crime. Once this lockdown goes into 7, 8, 9 days, we're going to see people begin to run out of food items. So definitely we want to reduce crime. What can these security officials do?
At the high command of the police, there needs to be developed a matrix of operation, where allotments will be made to these markets that have been identified within the three different states, Ogun, Lagos, and Ogun, and the Federal Capital Territory. Now, certain police resources will be deployed to the markets as have been identified. And then the protocols will be established for the procedures, so to speak, of opening of stores and purchase of goods by persons that come to the market. Talking about social distancing, it will be worked into the metrics. And so that will form the part of the SOP, Standard Operational Procedure, of the police officers or NSCDC officers that will be deployed to these markets as identified. Now that is for the markets. Then talking about the streets, certain resources of the security agencies also need to be deployed for street patrols, because at this time, street patrols are very, very important. They serve as a deterrence to, burglaries, shopliftings, and the rest. So it is at the level of the police high command to begin to develop these metrics that I've talked about.
Okay, you've talked about this likelihood of the patterns we are to see during this lockdown, talking about security breaches. I want to talk about the individual responsibility here. What can we do? What steps can we take to protect ourselves at this time? Because we do know that the security officials are likely overstretched to police this lockdown and enforce it. So how do we also take responsibility as individuals to keep ourselves safe?
Thank you. It has always been said that security is a collective responsibility. And we should not leave the security of our lives and property to the hands of security agents alone. Now, as an individual, as a family, what you should do is, first and foremost, health is wealth. Health is wealth. Don't go out. Comply with the procedures that have been laid down by government. Comply with the lockdown that has been, announced by government. Stay home and stay safe. That is to protect yourself from contact with persons who may be carrying the COVID virus. Now, when it comes to security of your property, it's important that in your environment, you have a well-lit compound. If it's your business premises, ensure that your business premise is well lit at night. Make sure, if you have the resources and your business is big enough, ensure that you hire private security. I want to thank the federal government, indeed the President Commander-in-Chief, for giving private security that pass, laissez-passer, during this period of lockdown. Because you see, private security protects the bottom line of businesses in Nigeria. And they are at the posts there. They are the first man on contact and the last man in defense. So I want to thank the government for giving private security. So if you can afford it, get private security to secure your business during this period of lockdown, your business premises. And for your homes, as much as possible, please ensure that you are vigilant. Maintain vigilance. Finally, if you have to stay at home longer than these 14 days that they have given, your health is also important. Please try and walk around. For those of you that are above 50, try and walk around so that there can be circulation, so that we don't keep dying now out of things other than COVID.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. But I just quickly want to talk about security of the indigent in society. Those that don't have a general power to power their lights and bulbs, and those that cannot employ a private security guard at this point in time, it's a case, like the French would say, c'est très dommage. It's a pity for them. What should they do?
Okay, that's why I said earlier that, you see, the police service is a public good. It's a public good, and resources of the public are spent on the police to keep the police policing our areas. So let us see how we can, at this point, withdraw police officers from areas that they are not so needed now and deploy to these vulnerable poorest of the poor of our society to see how they can help police them, police their environments. So this is what I think the police high command will be thinking of now, or should be thinking of.
All right, thank you very much. Very quickly, before we go, I'd just like to come in here and talk about the response that has been put out, like people that have basically had a chance to run in with the military or the police or any of that have had their civil rights or their human rights violated very quickly. Now, what is your take on that? Do you think that that's the best way to go?
Like I said earlier, that it is not acceptable by any norm whatsoever. And where cases are reported of violations of the fundamental human rights of the average Nigerian citizen, reports should be made to the appropriate superior authorities, and then I believe that punitive measures will be taken against the erring officers. It is not acceptable by any norm.
Thank you very much.
That's about all we can take. We'd like to say a very big thank you to you for joining us, and thank you so much for your time.